finished. I've been told we got lunch around 12:45. Is that correct? Anybody heard it differently? That's a long time from now. And y'all gonna. I'm not gonna make you suffer like that. You know. So. 12:30. 12:30. Ooh. Okay, I may make you suffer that long. That gives us an hour and 20 minutes. We'll take another break here in a few minutes, but
I got peanuts to be based on life.
Thank you, Justin. Very thoughtful. I've got a lot of material here I want to share. I want to just go through this very quickly. We're talking about the complexity of the human body, and I'd like to share a couple of other things with you, and then we'll move into something else. I want you to think about your eye for a minute. Infinitely more complex than any camera. It can handle 1.5 million simultaneous messages. It gathers 80% of all the knowledge ascribed to the brain. The retina covers less than a square inch. It contains 137 million light-sensitive receptor cells, 130 million rods allowing the eye to see in black and white, and 7 million cones allowing the eye to see in full color. In an average day, the eye moves about 100,000 times. And if you're at Walmart, it rolls an awful lot. Using muscles that milligram for milligram are among the body's strongest. The body would have to walk 50 miles to exercise the leg muscles an equal amount. The eye is self-cleaning. Lacrimal glands produce secretions, tears, that flush away dust and other foreign materials. Eyelids act as windshield washers. The blinking process, 3 to 6 times a minute, keeps the sensitive cornea moist and clean. And tears contain a potent microbe killer, lysosome, I believe is how you pronounce it, which guards the eyes against bacterial infection. During times of stress, one eye will rest while the other does 90% of the work. Then the process is reversed, allowing both eyes equal amounts of rest. The brain receives millions of simultaneous reports from the eyes. When its designated wavelength of light is present, each rod or cone triggers an electrical response to the brain, which then absorbs a composite set of yes or no messages from all the rods and cones. It sorts, organizes them, and presents the proper image accordingly. I don't know about you, but the more you know about the eye, just that one part of your body, the more impressed you have to be with the concept of a designer. Even Charles Darwin himself said, and this is a quote from Darwin himself, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for emitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. Well, it seems absurd because it is absurd to think that the eye just created itself. Now I want you to think about evolution for just a moment. Talk about the survival of the fittest and blah, blah, blah. Okay, how did the eye start working? What made something see like we have with our eye today? How did that happen? And what made it get to the point where it is now? How did it start from, well, it could see light at first, and then but how did that happen? What made that happen? According to the law of entropy, how could it have happened? Your eye is complex, just your eyeball and what your eye can do. Anyway, even Charles Darwin said, I think of this forming by natural selection is absurd in the highest degree. Now here's another thought from Genesis chapter 1. We're going to finish this chapter. God made us in His image. There's a lot that goes along with it that's associated with being created in God's image. Among those things is we are superior to animals. say that again. We are superior to animals. You'd be surprised at the number of people today that think, A, we are equal to animals, or they are equal to us, or sometimes I've had people say to me, animals are better than us. Now Jeremiah did say that, and we'll get to that when we're studying the book of Jeremiah. There are some things about animals that are superior to us. They don't forget, obviously, about God and their purpose in the world as we do. And so, in some sense, animals, I suppose, it could be argued, are a little smarter than us, at least in the way they behave. But they behave on what we call instinct. They just kind of created and operate that way. We are created in God's image, which allows us to think, to reason, gives us volition. We can choose to do this or that or the other. We don't just blindly have to follow a certain course. We can choose the course we follow. That distinguishes us from the other creatures. When I consider your heavens, David said, the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars which you ordain, what is man that you're mindful of him? The Son of Man, you visit him, for you made him a little lower than the angels and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him to have dominion over the works of your hand. You put all things under his feet, all sheep, oxen, the beast of the field, the fowl of the air, the fish of the sea, whatever passes through the paths of the sea. O Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. Have dominion over the creatures, the animals, the sea creatures. It's amazing, isn't it, when you think about legislators and some of the laws that they bring about. If there are certain field mice in places in Texas, you can't build a house or you can't build a road because you will interfere with that creature's habitat. Now, should we be mindful of that creature's habitat? Of course. But it's a rat! Even in Ratatouille, I don't think that, never mind, I just, when you think about how absurd our thinking has become, to think we're equal to animals or that they are equal to us is absurd. We're created in God's image. And since we're created in God's image, we're accountable for the choices that we make. When man made the wrong choice in the garden, Adam tried to absolve himself. He tried to get out of it. God said to Adam, because you listened to the voice of your wife, you've eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns also and thistles it shall bring forth to you. You shall eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you shall return. Did God hold Adam accountable? Yes, he did. Did he allow Adam the choice to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Yes, he did. But just like he gave him that choice and the freedom to choose, he also held him accountable for that choice. And we have some that escaped. Mommy's over there with the cookies. No, Mommy's over there. I don't know about you, I find that quite joyful. Anyway, here's something that's really profound. We've been created in God's image. We are, therefore, the object of his incomprehensible love. In Ephesians 3:18, Paul said that you may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth, length, depth, and height, and to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge. That that you might be filled with all the fullness of God. Even when man sinned in the very garden where sin was first committed, God said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. It shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. God was saying to man, even there, in the moment of rebellion, I'm going to fix this problem. You made this horrible problem. I'm going to fix it. And how did he fix it? You remember in the garden when Peter pulled out his sword and he struck Malchus, the servant, the high priest, with his sword and took off his ear? And the Lord took his ear, put it back on, and he looked at Peter and said, put your sword up. Don't you know I could presently call legions of angels, and they would deliver me from this hour? When you think about who took that dirt, Donna, and formed man and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, who did that? According to John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But why did he become flesh and dwell among us? The Hebrew writer said, a body you have prepared me. Why? What was his body prepared for? To be a sacrifice. For what? For our rebellion. Now, why would God do that? The only answer. He loves us more than we can even conceive. We relate to it. We try to understand it. We try to emulate as best we can that love. But it truly boggles the mind. Even the Holy Spirit admitted for us, it's beyond your ability to grasp. Just like his power in creating this vast universe, so is his love. We simply cannot grasp or understand it. Any thoughts or comments before we go to our next class? We finished that one. That's good. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I remember just a few years ago, the American Civil Liberties Union filed in U.S. District Court a lawsuit against Cobb County. Do you remember that? Was it that long ago? And the lawsuit against Cobb County was to force them to remove a disclaimer. Cobb County had simply placed a disclaimer, pasted it inside their textbook, their biology textbooks. And this is what the disclaimer says. And this is a quote. This textbook contains material on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. This material should be approached with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered. End of quote. Let me ask you, just an objective listener, what's wrong with that disclaimer? Did this disclaimer say evolution is stupid? Evolution is wrong? You shouldn't believe in evolution? You should go to church? Is there anything in that disclaimer even remotely saying that? No. What does the disclaimer say? Approach this material with an open mind and think about it while you read it and study it. Now, what's wrong with that? I thought we were supposed to use our brains when we went to school. Things have changed a lot since you were in school, since I was in school. Nowadays, we're not told to think. We're told to shut up, listen, and recite, and rehearse, and remember, and speak and preach the party line. That's what we're told. No more do we think. No more do we ask. Why would someone wear a Georgia Tech shirt in a Georgia Bulldog church? I don't know why someone would do that. These are thoughts that confront my mind when I'm distracted in a Bible class. And I see that GT, and I'm like, at least it's a Georgia team. I'll give you that, brother. I'll give you that it's a Georgia team. That's better than these Alabama folks, which...
Roll Tide.
There you go.
with the herd mentality, not loyal to their I don't know about you, this whole mind, forget evolution for a minute. It's not just about evolution, it's about anything. We're not supposed to think about anything anymore. We're not supposed to use our brains at all. Just shut up and fall in line. Have you had the vaccine? I mean, don't start me on that. I'm just saying, have you had the vaccine? I don't know. Should you? Shouldn't you? I don't know. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. But that's not what our government is telling us. Our government is telling us, shut up and get it. But maybe we should pause a moment and ask, yeah, but I don't want to get COVID, but is this the answer? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Nothing wrong with getting it, nothing wrong with not getting it. But there's something terribly wrong when we're told by those administering it, don't think about it, don't ask us about it, just shut up and do it. That bothers me. Whatever that is, that's scary, because we need to start thinking whether we should or shouldn't. And I'm not saying either one. I'm saying we need to think critically and open-mindedly about any of these issues. Should we have all unisex bathrooms where men can walk in with little girls and do their business? I mean, this is a question that I'm not even sure what we're asking, but we are asking it. But maybe we should think about it. Is it really smart? I worked for 4 years with state inmates. They're pretty good at convincing you that, oh, I'm on the straight and narrow. I'm getting myself straightened out, Officer Gray, blah, blah, blah. I just found out, by the way, one of my former inmates who had gotten out last summer was coming off parole today, was reincarcerated yesterday for felony fentanyl, felony possession of fentanyl. So of course, he was using it himself. It broke my heart because I think the world of this young man. He was a fine young man. I was planning to go see him next week. He's the one I was trying to get hooked up in the church there at Milledgeville. But he's in prison now, reincarcerated. I mean, that's just less than a year he's been out. But these guys are good at convincing you they're okay. Even the ones that like little girls. And so now the mayor of Atlanta says, if you're a guy, you can go to the girls' bathroom, or girl, you can go to the guy's bathroom. That's very important. Forget the gun violence, forget the looting, forget the destruction. Just let's be glad now we have unisex. I mean, this is what happened when we stop thinking. We just forget about brain cells for a minute. We just start responding to stupidity. You know, we really are behind in the battle of ideas, and that troubles me. This has been going on, I mentioned in the first class, it's been going on since the beginning of the 20th century in earnest. It's been going on for a long time, but here in America, there are forces that have infiltrated every segment of society. They started in education. They've moved into the political realm, in entertainment. They're in certainly government. They're everywhere. You can't escape those who are promoting this godless worldview. And as parents, as teachers, as preachers, we need to do everything in our power to respond to this battle of ideas. I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning science and the battle over worldviews. I want to talk to you a minute about science because it really irks me, and probably does you too, that whenever we hear about evolution, we hear, well, that's science. And all that church stuff, that's just all faith. So you got your faith over here, and what they really mean by that, it's kind of an insult. What they're really saying is you're putting your brain on hold, and you're not really thinking, you're just following your subjective feelings over here. Well, we've got sound scientific basis over here for believing in what? That our bodies, this world, this universe, simply came into existence all on its own in a mindless process called evolution. And that's science. Let's look at that for a minute. 1966, it's been going on a long time. A geneticist, Herman Mueller, circulated a manifesto, and this is what it said. There are no hypotheses alternative to the principle of evolution with its tree of life that any competent biologist of today takes seriously. Moreover, the principle is so important for an understanding of the world we live in and of ourselves that the public in general, including students taking biology in high school, should be made aware of it and of the fact that it is firmly established, even as the rotundity of the earth is firmly established. In other words, if you got any sense at all, this is the way, what they mean. If you got any brains at all, you know that evolution is true. It's a proven fact. It's just as proven as the earth is round. And if you deny evolution, you're a flat earther. You might as well be a flat earther. That's what they're saying. This is 1966. National Academy of Sciences said in a similar resolution, whereas we understand a requirement that textbooks for use in public schools give parallel treatment to the theory of evolution and the belief in special creation, and whereas the essential procedural foundations of science exclude appeal to supernatural causes as a concept not susceptible to validation by objective criteria, and whereas religion and science are therefore separate and mutually exclusive realms of human thought, whose presentation in the same context leads to misunderstanding of both scientific theory and religious belief, we, the members of the National Academy of Sciences, assembled at the autumn 1972 meeting, urged that textbooks of the sciences utilized in the public schools of the nation be limited to the exposition of scientific matter. They won that battle. Notice in this really hard to read and understand statement what they're admitting at that time, that both creation and evolution were at that time still being presented in school. But they were envisioning a time when we're going to completely get religion and this idea of God out of our minds, and we're not even discuss it. It's not even going to be considered anymore because it's not legitimate. That's what they're saying. And so it began a long time ago. 1980, Discovery Magazine, Ben Bova asserted evolution is the cornerstone of the biological sciences. No serious scientist disputes this so far. Not one shred of evidence has ever been found to support the creationist view. Not a finger bone, not a leaf, not a shard of evidence exists. We may have been created by some deity or other unfathomable force, but there is no evidence whatsoever that it happened in this way. It's a pretty bold assertion. Let me ask you this question. Where's the evidence for evolution? And just hold on to that thought for a minute, but where's the evidence for evolution? Where are the finger bones for evolution? The leaves for evolution? I mean, I'm just asking, where are all the evidence that are supposed to remind us that it's scientifically based? Should we be intimidated? I like what Guy Wood said many years ago. He was talking about this and other related material. He said the familiar affirmation of the great apostle in Romans 12 verse 2 was designed to guard the Lord's people from the corrupting influences of an evil environment, as well as from the powerful appeals of mob psychology to which so many in every generation succumb. Man may, and often does, imbibe the evil characteristics of those about him as readily and often more so than the good ones. All history, as well as the testimony of our own hearts, bears witness to the fact that custom, fashion, and example often wield a more powerful influence on people than reason, reflection, and good judgment. To multitudes of people today, the habits and practices of those around them exercise an almost irresistible appeal. Timid souls are often prompted to do that which is in violation of their concepts of right and wrong from fear of being regarded as old-fashioned, outmoded, out of step with the times. The cliche, everybody's doing it, has lulled countless thousands into a false sense of security from which they will never awake, and has caused them to live a manner of life which otherwise they never would. It is dangerous to follow the multitude because the majority is almost always on the wrong side in this world. Must never be forgotten that the broad way is the way of the world. Those who go in thereat do so to their own destruction. These are powerful thoughts. And as I read this, I want to share something with you very gingerly and tenderly, because I know it is a sensitive subject. Mask wearing. When COVID hit, we were told, don't wear a mask. Then we were told, wear a mask. And so we're back and forth whether we should wear a mask, not wear a mask, because we don't want to get COVID. Okay, well, I'm just going to cite this as an example. At the prison, we have a lieutenant there who enforces the rules and regulations. Enforces everyone to wear a mask because he doesn't want anything, COVID or otherwise, spreading through the prison. Understandable. So they administer cloth masks, which the inmates made from old shirts. So they take cloth masks, put strings on them, and they tie them to the face and wear them all day long. Now, what are they doing with those masks? Well, they're pulling them down, pulling them up. They're pulling them down, they're pulling them up. They're going to the bathroom, using the bathroom, not washing their hands. They're touching everything in that environment. They're going to the mess hall. They're doing everything that people do. And they're touching their mask, untouching their mask, touching their mask, all day long. You can't go anywhere in that prison without that stupid mask on. And this is in the name of not spreading disease. Now, what do you put on your hands when you touch stuff? And when you put those hands, they say don't pick your nose, don't rub your eyes during the flu season, right? That makes sense. Why? Because you're picking up germs, and then you go to rub your eye, and what have you just done? You just rubbed a bunch of germs in your eye. Well, when you're wearing a cloth mask, and you're constantly down, up, and it falls on the ground, you step up, oh, I'm sorry, you pick it back up, put it back on your face, because you're trying, it's insane! I'm sorry. This is insane, but this is mob psychology. You have to do it. Why? Because Dr. Fauci said, I'm sorry, people need to start questioning stuff. Is this the best way to keep diseases from spreading? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. It doesn't seem very smart to me. That's all I'm saying. That's my opinion. You may have a different opinion. You may think mask wearing is the rage, and we should knock yourself out. I think it's probably better to stay away from stuff that's constantly on your face, because you're going to be more likely to introduce germs into your system than you otherwise would. That's just my opinion based on the limited medical knowledge that I have. But again, I don't want to get distracted with that. I'm saying from Guy and Wood's statement, this mask thing disturbs me because many in our society have just gone completely off the rails in some kind of insane, irrational fear. I mean, should we be afraid? Of course. I'm afraid every time I get in the car and pull out of the driveway. It could be the last time I say hello or goodbye to anybody. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. Stuff happens. It's a terrible world we live in because of our sin. That's the nature of things. But to say we're going to get tied up in knots in fear, but this is just one way of illustrating evolution or any other thought process. Everybody knows it's true. Well, who's everybody? And what gives everybody the right to tell me what to think? I'm sorry, I've got too much Celtic blood. I just don't buy what everybody's telling me. I'm kind of repulsed by that. I mean, you got to make me believe it. I'm going to believe it. At least convince me that this is true before I'm just going to blindly accept it. You know, people say, well, you go to church with your mom and dad. I don't go to church with my mom. They certainly influence me. I'm a member of the Lord's body today because I believe there is a God in heaven. I believe that heaven is real, hell is real. I believe the Bible is the Word of God, and I believe that I'm going to answer to God one day. That's what I believe with all of my heart, mind, and soul, because I've been convinced by the evidence. I thank my parents for steering me in the right direction, but I've studied this stuff for myself. I don't just blindly follow anybody or anything on any subject. And yet, when it comes to evolution, that's what we're supposed to do. Just accept it because, hey, everybody knows it's true. Do they? Who was alive in the beginning? Were you there to see? Let's say there was a big bang. Did you see it? Did anybody film it on their smartphone? I mean, what do we know about the Big Bang? What do we know about and God said, other than what's recorded in Genesis 1? The point I'm making is no one was there that first day of creation. No one was there. No man or woman was there. Now, were the sons of God there? Yes, they were. They saw what God was making, and they rejoiced at it. But there were no human beings alive to witness that first day, or that second day, or that third day, or that fourth day, or that fifth day. There were hippos around before there were, well, at least there were whales around, and there were birds around before there were people around to see this great creation. I wasn't there, and neither were you. So you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with the question of science. Did we evolve by blind chance, or were we created with a purpose? Is evolution scientifically sound? According to the Georgia standards, Georgia.org standards, this is according to the standards of educators in the state of Georgia. This is a prerequisite, characteristics of science, habits of mind. And I want to just read to you SCSH1. This is what students are supposed to evaluate: the importance of curiosity, honesty, openness, and skepticism in science. I'm going to read that again. Students will evaluate the importance of curiosity. What made that fish crawl out of the ocean? I remember asking Miss Walker that question, because she showed us the pictures of the fish and had a little leg. I remember asking that question. I don't know. Well, what made them grow legs? And then I raised the hand again. Well, you know how many times I've dreamed about flying? Why can't I just grow wings and start flying? I mean, I want to fly. Why can't I grow wings and fly? I just will it. I just want it to happen. So those fishes wanted to crawl on natural selection answer. It doesn't answer anything. Why don't we ask questions? Why aren't we curious? Because we're told, shut up, dummy. The scientists have all said. And everyone with brains knows and believes. And if you're questioning, it means you're not very smart. That's why we don't ask it. We've been bullied and intimidated into silence. And that's sad. Our young people need to be taught to be curious, to be honest, to be open, to be skeptical about all these scientific thoughts. That's what it says. However, that's not where it stops. And also, under point B in this same paragraph, recognize that different explanations often can be given for the same evidence. That's interesting. They're admitting that we can have two different ways of looking at the same evidence. Well, that's good, right? Well, what about SCSH7? This same Georgia standards, this is what we're told. Universal principles are discovered through observation and experimental verification. Universal principles. So if I'm on the moon, if I'm on Mars, if I'm on planet Earth, there's certain physical things that I know are going to be consistent, right? Testing, revising, occasionally rejecting new and old theories never ends. It is established science that driving fossil fuel vehicles is causing global warming. Shut up and believe that. That's what we're told in school. Now, but wait a minute. It just said here in the Georgia standards, we're supposed to be constantly revising and updating. Maybe Al Gore was wrong. Maybe he didn't know what in the world he was talking about. Maybe we should question his theories and ideas. He, after all, lives in a mansion, drives in on a personal plane. I mean, maybe we ought to ask, is he right about something? Maybe he's insane. Maybe he's bought up by the Chinese. I don't know. There's got to be something. We're not even asking questions anymore. But the Georgia Standard says we should be asking questions. This is from Wikipedia. To be termed scientific, a method of inquiry must be based on gathering observable, empirical, and measurable evidence subject to specific principles of reasoning. In other words, I could take creation and reproduce it, and test it, and Verified. You ever done that? Can you see the creation and recreate it and test it scientifically? No, you cannot. What about the Big Bang? How many times can we reproduce the Big Bang and study it and watch its effect and reproduce it?
None, but I would ask, if it's been billions and billions of years, why hadn't it happened again? I mean,
Well, it's going to, Donna. Just give it time. Just give it enough time. It's going to.
And why did we stop evolving? Like,
Yeah.
we're not the best.
You're not supposed to ask questions like not supposed to ask questions like that.
Well, what they do is they take evidence from macroevolution and try to make believe and convince you that microevolution is also.
I think you had that backward. Microevolution. Yeah.
I mean, we can observe, this bird has a different shaped beak than this bird over here, but at the end of the day, that's
It's still a bird. You're getting ahead of me, but you're right. When we're talking, I'm just simply raising a simple question. When we hear the criticism, the creation point of view is not scientifically based. Well, neither is Darwinism. It is not scientifically based. And for someone to say that it is, they're lying to you. They're simply lying about it. And to be intimidated and bullied, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. We really need to be asking, why are we still evolving? I mean, why am I not better looking today? Why am I uglier than I was 10 years ago? I don't know. I mean, I seem to be getting worse, not better. What's wrong with me? These are questions that we need to ask. But we're not asking them anymore because we're not supposed to. Because smart people don't ask questions like that. Let's consider some science for a minute. What about the law of biogenesis? What's the law of biogenesis? Anybody know? No, not really. The law of biogenesis means that all living things come from pre-existing living things. You said everything comes after its kind. That's genetics. But the law of biogenesis means everything that's alive came from something that's alive. Right? Well, I like what George Wall said a long time ago. This is before I was even born. He said, one has only to contemplate the magnitude of this task to concede that the spontaneous generation of a living organism is impossible. Yet, here we are. As a result, I believe in spontaneous generation. Now, what's scientific about that admission? He just said, scientifically, it is impossible. It goes against a law of science. When something's just stated to be a law of science, it has been observed, it's been repeated. We recognize the law of gravity means whatever goes up must do what? And the law of biogenesis is just as firm as the law of gravity. And yet, evolution is based on something that flies in the very face of biogenesis. It says that we just started living from non-living material. How do you explain that? Well, spontaneous generation. It just happened. Remember, back in the early days of Darwinism, they would see a cow patty, and they would see maggots come from it, and they see flies flying out of it. And they called that spontaneous generation. Well, now, how do those maggots get in that cow patty? A fly landed on it. A living thing landed on it, planted its seed there, and then maggots grew and made more flies. But just looking at it without thinking that through, you might argue spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation is so utterly absurd. It's not a law of science. And yet, everything about Darwinian evolution is based on spontaneous generation. And we're told that it's scientific, and only smart people believe in it. What about, we mentioned the second law of thermodynamics. Lord Kelvin, physicist, he said it this way. He said, there's no natural process, the only result of which is to cool a heat reservoir and do external work. In more understandable terms, this law observed the fact that the usable energy in the universe is becoming less and less. Ultimately, there will be no available energy left. Stemming from this fact, we find that the most probable state for any natural system is one of disorder. All natural systems degenerate when left to themselves. Things are winding down. They're not winding up. But evolution claims quite the opposite. Over billions of years, everything basically is going upward, getting better, becoming more orderly, more complex. But this flies in the face of a known scientific law, the law of thermodynamics. It says everything's going downward toward simplification and disorder. When you read in Genesis, for example, that Methuselah lived to be, 969 years old? Is that right? A long time. Man, that's a long time. I bet he stopped watching the news when he was 20 years old. Can you imagine 900 and something years not watching the news? I mean, you have to be saying that long. So that's a long time. That's 1,000 years. It's a millennium. 1,000 years. How did human beings do that? You have a clue?
It's God's will.
Well, God's will, yeah, but how did human beings live that long? I mean, if you live to be 95, 100 years old today, they consider you to be what? Well aged. Right? To use a biblical term, a good old age. 1,000 years. So, does it sound like we're getting stronger or weaker? I mean, this is a law of science. How did life originate? Robert Jastrow, he said, perhaps the appearance of life on the earth is a miracle. Scientists are reluctant to accept that view, but their choices are limited. Either life was created on the earth by the will of a being outside the grasp of scientific understanding, or it evolved on our planet spontaneously through chemical reactions occurring in non-living matter lying on the surface of the planet. The first theory places the question of the origin of life beyond the reach of scientific inquiry. It is a statement of faith in the power of a supreme being not subject to the laws of science. The second theory is also an act of faith. The act of faith consists in assuming that the scientific view of the origin of life is correct without having concrete evidence to support that belief. We're talking philosophy. We're not talking science. What is your view of the origin of the world? Well, I believe that there's a God. There are others that say there is no God. But when it comes to the question of science, neither camp can say we have scientifically investigated and concluded that this is the correct view. Now, the evolutionists claim that they have science on their side, but we have science on our side. We can't resolve the question scientifically in the ultimate sense of right or wrong on whichever side you happen to fall. Wayne Jackson said the Darwinian crowd insists that the subject of origins must exclude that which cannot be subjected to the scientific method. In brief, observation, verification, either elimination or validation. Well, if one may borrow an odd proverb, let's see if the sauce that is good for the goose is also good for the gander. I mean, you're just stating what I just did. How about this Science Digest article from John Gribben? Let me say that again. Science Digest article written by astrophysicist John Gribben. And this is a quote from an astrophysicist. Our ancestors fell to Earth from space after evolving in the warm, wet nucleus of a comet. Single-celled bacteria develop not in Earth's oceans, but in these cometary pools, feeding off the rich mixture of molecules present in interstellar clouds, blowing across the galaxy, propelled by the pressure of starlight on their tiny shells, ultimately landing on our young planet. This startling scenario, suggested by Sir Fred Hoyle of the University College in Cardiff, Wales, and his colleague Sandra, I can't pronounce her name, is part of a new theory about the origins of life that characterizes the universe as a vast biological machine and comets as cosmological Johnny Appleseeds, spreading the germ of life wherever they travel. All right, there it is. That's science for you. Now, how many times have we seen that tested and verified? It sounds like a comic book, doesn't it? This is from an astrophysicist. But if you question it, because you're stupid, because every smart person knows that Johnny Appleseeds come from comets. Creation cannot be observed. Macro-Darwinian evolution neither has been observed. So how do we even remotely suggest that macroevolution is the result of reality and not God? Well, the evolution relies on what? Instead of God, what does the evolution rely on? Time is God for the evolutionists. Darwin's theory, if at all possible, would require billions and billions of years. It would require that if it had the slightest chance of being right. R.Y. Song said in his book, The Creation-Evolution Controversy, both evolutionists and creationists believe evolution is an impossibility if the universe is only a few thousand years old. There probably is no statement that could be made on the topic of origins which would meet with so much agreement from both sides. Setting aside the question of whether vast time is competent to propel evolution, we must query if vast time is indeed available. Marshall and Sandra Hall said it like this in the book, The Truth, God, or Evolution. It's not easy to overthrow a belief, however absurd and harmful it may be, which your civilization has promulgated as the scientific truth for the better part of a century. And that's what we're dealing with, by the way. They continue, time, as poets and insurance salesmen remind us, is the enemy of life. But time has its friends too. Without great, incomprehensible, immeasurable stretches of time to fall back on, the evolutionists would be sitting ducks for the barbed queries of even high school students. Time is the evolutionist refuge from the slings and arrows of logic, scientific evidence, common sense, and the multiplication table. The proven uncertainties about scientific dating are a well-kept secret. The average person reading his newspaper or magazine gets a clear impression that dating is a science as exact as the addition of fractions. Since no one can envision 10,000 years, much less a 500,000 or million years, scientists can hide behind the 2,000 millions of years they say evolution took, and they can hide there in relative safety, they think. It's just such a vast amount of time, you just can't conceive of all the things that could have possibly happened, and that's stated on scientific fact. Really? George Wald, again, said the important point is that since the origin of life belongs in the category of at least once phenomenon, time is on its side. However improbable we regard this event or any of the steps which it involves, given enough time, it will almost certainly happen at least once. And for life as we know it, with its capacity for growth and reproduction, once may be enough. Time is in fact the hero of the plot. The time with which we have to deal with is of the order of 2 billion years. By the way, it's now, I think, 11 or 12 billion. This is an old quote. What we regard as impossible on the basis of human experience is meaningless here. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles. This is his statement. He literally is saying time is God. Time created everything. I mean, we can't see it, we can't verify it, we can't empirically study it, but we know scientifically that time produces life as we know it. And if you question that, then you're stupid. I don't know about you, I'm tired of being told to stop thinking. I'm tired of being told to just follow the crowd. I'm tired of everybody saying, just everybody knows it to be. I'm tired of that. We need to start asking questions again. Even though the whole world seemed to have embraced it. I mean, have you watched a Discovery show recently that didn't, at its heart and soul feature evolution? No, you haven't. Because it's all based in evolution. Some of the best documentaries put together on planet Earth. Beautiful, spectacular images captured on camera and using all kind of new age technology, nevertheless, as you watch that program, you're hearing about so-and-so evolved over billions of years. I'm sick of hearing that. It's just stupid. But we're told not to ask it. We're not told not to question it. We're told to just follow it because it's scientific. But is the earth billions of years old?
Something that makes me think this certainly is a tool of the devil is because ultimately it doesn't matter whether you believe in creation or evolution today. If you're a scientist, it's not going to affect whether you find a cure for cancer. It doesn't matter how it began. But that's what you're ingrained to believe. You can't be a scientist. You can't come up with a new technological innovation. You can't cure a disease. You can't do the research without proper understanding of how the world began. But those things, none of those things that we're seeking to solve today, the problems of life today, are not going to, it doesn't matter if we evolved or if we were created. It's not an issue that affects a scientific outcome today. So the purpose, the only purpose then, in constantly saying you are not smart, you are not a true scientist if you don't subscribe to evolution, it is only social and psychological and spiritual. It has no scientific bearing.
It is groupthink, and it is bullying to the extreme. Don't question it, just accept it.
If you take two people and say, go solve this problem, they can both come up with the same solution through testing and science. And they could both have very different views on
The origin of life.
the origin of life. So the only purpose in cramming this and hitting us over the head with it all the time is as a tool of the devil. That's the only purpose it can have. Because it has no bearing on true science.
That's a very good point. And that's exactly what we're saying here, is that everything that we hear about so-called science proving evolution is just an assertion. It's not based in science. It's just, don't question us. Just accept it. Go along with it. Expert. Everybody knows. Everybody's an expert. Everybody knows, Well, okay. I like what Stephen Morbeth, an evolutionist associated with the University of Oxford, had to say. He said, talking about the age of the earth and the evidence for it, for an old earth, he said, no terrestrial rocks closely approaching an age of 4.5 billion years have yet been discovered. The evidence for the age of the earth is circumstantial, being based upon indirect reasoning. Dr. John Eddy, an evolutionary astronomer, stated there's no evidence based solely on solar observations that the sun is 4.5 to 5 billion years old. He goes on to say, I suspect that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. However, given some new and unexpected results to the contrary, and some time for frantic recalculation and theoretical readjustment, I suspect that we could live with Bishop Ussher's value for the age of the earth and sun, 4004 BC. I don't think we have much in the way of observational evidence in astronomy to conflict with that. Well, that's a rather stark admission. We don't really have anything in evidence. And these are not preachers. These are not Sunday school teachers. These are the evolutionists that are clearly admitting we don't have any evidence for this. And if you can present us some evidence to the contrary, we might even have to believe that the earth is a little more than 6,000 years old. How many people do you know will be willing to say, I believe the earth is less than 10,000 years old, and someone not snicker? Oh, you're one of them. You might as well be a flat earther if you believe the earth is less than 10,000 years old. I said that at work one time. Somebody's talking about something, asking Bible questions. I think the earth's less than that. Oh, come on now, be serious. I'm like, I am being serious. I think the earth's less than 10,000 years old. And just dismissed out of hand, like, okay, well, you don't even equate, we're not listening to you, you're not part of this discussion because you obviously aren't in your right mind. That's sad that this bullying has had such an effect. that people simply don't even question it anymore, don't even think about it. We really need to start working with our kids and our grandkids and arming ourselves. There's a lot of scientific evidence, by the way, that points to a young earth, and I don't want to get into that now because it's about 12:05 or 12:06, and I can tell by the look on your face you've had enough of this. What? I can tell. We need to sneak, because I'm a sneaky person, and go get some cookies when Lisa isn't looking, hopefully not listening. I don't think they'll miss the cookie. Do you, Jordan? There are spies everywhere. We could go. I'm bigger than a spy. We could go get one of the kids and usher them back there, and they're our cover. And we could do something like that. Any questions or comments? I want to hear from you. I've been doing all the talking.
Good class.
Well, thank you.
You referenced Blake, Guy in the Woods.
Yes, sir.
1958, I was preaching in Valdosta, Georgia, at the church and now that's part of the church. He came for a gospel meeting. He was reputation was one of the greatest thinkers in our brotherhood. I didn't have a nice chair in the house to sit in, so I went out and bought a new rocking chair so he could sit on it when he visited me. First day he was there, I went to the motel and picked him up. The chair had just been delivered to my house. I asked him to take a seat in that chair. He tried to. The chair went all to pieces. He fell over. I tried to help him up, and he didn't want him to help because that face was red. He said, Brother Gray, if you think that's a good practical joke, I can't agree. I disagree seriously. We became good friends. Years have passed, but I think every Christian, that wasn't a practical joke.
Was it what? Was it made in China?
Big part.
Was it made in China? Was the chair made in China?
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so I didn't know about that story. I never heard that before. See,
He wasn't injured, thankfully.
he thought you'd played a joke on him, huh?
He was in his early 70s at that time. To me, he was an old man.
Yeah, yeah. You bought him a new rocking chair, and he
Just for him. Just for him.
reminded me of that scene in the movie The Patriot where he was trying to make a rocking chair and he sat in it and fell apart.
I thought that old man would need a rocking chair.
Yeah. Good to see all these kids here today. We have a lot of them here. I hope and pray we can arm them against what's being thrown at them every day. Brother Weaver, has been pushing the idea of a school here. I've been thinking about that for years too, and I know a lot of young parents would love to have a school. It seemed like to me the logistical nightmare involved in that would be almost insurmountable, but then I feel ashamed for thinking that way, believing that maybe we're just lacking faith and we just need to figure out how we can. I know there's a lot of people in this area that would love to see a school. We have a co-op and we get together and we share a lot of things, and that's good. But we really need to take it to the next level, I think, and provide an alternative, not just for our own children, but for the children in this community. And you'd be surprised at what an influence such an arrangement could be for the next generation. I know one thing, I'm scared to death to think about what this generation of millennials is bringing to the world. I'm sorry to sound brutally hateful to say that, but I'm just being honest. There's just so much they don't know, and they haven't been taught, and they've never experienced, and don't have a clue. And we're gonna reap a bitter whirlwind if we do not take care of this next generation. And I pray that God give us the wisdom and the foresight to do, and the courage to do what needs to be done. I'm going to go get something from my throat because it's getting dry, and I'm going to sneak a cookie while I'm there. And if somebody calls me sneaky, then that's fine. My granddaughter called me that already. Thank y'all for being in class.